Hi friends, thank you for taking time out of your week to spend a little with me. I appreciate you. This week we've got another viewer suggestion. This one comes from YouTube user Becky Blanchard 835. Thank you in advance. We're discussing the tragic murder of the Milkin family. As always, I ask you to join me as we remember Olga, Justin, Andrew Milkin, and Lubov Botvina. In 1989, Pavel Milkin moved his family from Estonia to the United States in hope of bettering not only their lives, but their opportunities as well, through a sponsor in Everett, Washington. He found work as a welder and an apartment for his family, before finding a home in Mill Creek. Pavel remembered at the time of his family's arrival into the country, he spoke no English, but could feel the beauty of the people in America. His son, Leonid Milkin, born September 6, 1976, was a teenager when his family moved to the United States, and before long, he would make his own American dream with his own family. Based on varying sources, Leonid met Olga either in high school or at the church they both attended. Leonid felt Olga's caring personality the moment he met her. He knew he was in love and wanted her to be his wife. Olga was very outgoing and went out of her way to make sure everyone was included, whereas Leonid was quieter and more reserved. The couple tied the knot on January 24, 1998, when he was 21 and she was 20. Born on July 21, 1977 in Russia, Olga was one of 5 girls born to her mother, Lubov Botvina. Their story was similar to that of the Milkins. Both were of Russian descent who made the move to the United States, where her mother found work as a fiscal specialist for the University of Washington. Lubov raised her girls lovingly and always made time for them, where she invested every minute of her life into them. Olga was close with all of her sisters, especially Lubov, who went by Luba due to sharing the same name as her mother. Luba was born on November 26, 1981, and much like Olga, was a devout Christian and very active in her church, Christian Faith Center. She was studying at Seattle Pacific University to be a translator for the hospital. She was very dedicated to her education. Although she lived in Seattle full-time, she spent her free time at her sister's home in Kirkland. Luba was described as sweet and generous, and inspiring to both friends and family. The Botvinas and the Milkins were just one big happy family, who accepted each other with open arms. Leonid's parents loved not only Olga, but her sisters as well. The families always made time to get together for dinners and celebrate in life's joys. This included the birth of Olga and Leonid's 2 sons. Justin Daniel Milkin was born August 29, 2000. He was said to be a curious and spirited child. He was very similar to Olga in that he was creative. His favorite hobby was picking flowers. Andrew Benjamin Milkin was born August 21, 2002, and he idolized his older brother. He wanted to be just like Justin. He was thoughtful but strong-willed. Both boys were described as sweet and happy. After the birth of his second son, Leonid joined the Washington National Guard in November of 2002. He was based at the Tacoma Armory and a member of Alpha Company, 341st Military Intelligence Battalion. His family were very proud of his service. His sons would salute him and wear his uniforms around the home. Olga worked as a dental assistant in Bellevue. In 2003, Leonid and Olga bought their first home in Kirkland, Washington, a dream the two had for quite some time. This home was built in 1914 and needed work, but together the couple wanted to remodel and truly make it their own. But then, in September of 2005, Leonid, who worked in military intelligence, volunteered to go to Iraq and served due to a need of personnel with his skill set. It was a hard decision for the family, but they felt it was a sacrifice worth doing. Both Olga and Leonid agreed to be strong. While away, they spoke every day, as long as the phone connection held up. They looked towards the future, making plans for when he returned home. Neighbors described Olga as really strong. Despite Leonid being away, she was never sad and always in a good mood. Both Olga and Leonid's family stepped in to help out with Luba moving in for the summer. Months after his departure, Olga decided to resign from her position at the dental office in order to dedicate her time to her sons. She'd always wanted to be a full-time mom and spent her free time doing activities with the boys and paying close attention to their schooling. She scheduled phone conferences with Justin's teacher twice a week to ensure he was not only doing well, but socializing with his peers. Olga and the children attended 2 church services a week, going to the American church in the morning and the Russian church in the evening. She, much like the rest of her family, were very devout in their religion. Despite the distance, the Milkin family were very happy and counting down the days until Leonid came home. On July 17, 2006, Leonid was in the barracks reading his Bible when a fellow soldier ran in, alerting him of an urgent message from the Red Cross. He was escorted to the chaplain's office, where they confiscated his firearm and additional ammunition, before telling him there had been an accident. Leonid knew something bad happened, but couldn't imagine it was as bad as it was. He was immediately transported back to the States. At 11:32 a.m., a fire was reported at the 9500 block of Slater Avenue from a nearby neighbor. It took firefighters an hour to extinguish the flames and an additional 4 before an investigation could begin. No call was made from inside of the house, and it seemed the fire started at random. Once the conditions were stable, investigators discovered 4 victims. In the upstairs bedroom were the bodies of Olga and Luba. Then, in the adjacent hallway, were Justin and Andrew. It was believed they perished due to smoke inhalation, but it seemed odd given the time of day the fire started. Per other members of their family, Olga and the children wouldn't have been asleep, so they couldn't understand how they were unable to escape the house, or at the very least call for help. It just didn't add up. Fire officials and the ATF, along with search dogs, were brought into the house to determine the cause of the fire. From this, it was determined the fire was set intentionally. Gasoline was the accelerant of choice, and was used in multiple points of the interior of the home. Once the bodies were removed, they were transported to the King County Coroner's Office where autopsies were performed. During the autopsy of all victims, no deaths were related to smoke or fire-related injuries. Each victim had stab wounds to their upper body and head. The children suffered wounds to their throats as well. The case was then viewed as a homicide investigation. When sifting through the rubble, Kirkland officials pulled anything that could be evidence. This included a hunting knife, a set of bloody clothing, a flashlight, and a partially burned glove. Police set out to interview neighbors in the area for suspicious activity around the time of the fire, on July 18, 2006. From these discussions, 2 women were able to provide descriptions of a man seen near the Milkins' home at the time of the fire. The suspect was allegedly lurking around the property with what appeared to be a container. They described him as a white male in his mid-20s. He had a distinctive tattoo of a green dragon on his left bicep. When provided the additional information, another neighbor pointed out that this description matched the newest resident of the area, Connor Shireman. Connor happened to live across the street from the Milkins in a duplex. He moved in 2 weeks prior and was not friendly with neighbors who tried to introduce themselves. They claimed he mostly kept to himself. Police made contact with Connor at his residence, where right off the bat they noticed he not only matched the description right down to the tattoo, but also had deep scratches on his face and a puncture wound on his left forearm. When questioned about the Milkins, Connor stated he didn't know the family. Then he was questioned a step further about the wounds on his face and arms, where he claimed he broke up a fight at a nearby gas station earlier in the day. After meeting with Connor, investigators believed they had their guy, and left for the AM/PM convenience store to confirm his alibi. When the tapes were reviewed, they did not show a fight in the parking lot, but Connor leaving with a red canister of gas. The following morning, July 19th, Connor was arrested. Once in custody, he no longer denied having involvement, but claimed he woke up from one nightmare to another. On July 16th, Connor stated he drank 3 bottles of vodka late into the evening before blacking out. When he woke up the following morning, he was in the Milkins' master bedroom, covered in blood, surrounded by 4 victims, and had no recollection of the previous night. He removed his bloody clothing, showered and dressed in a set of hospital scrubs he found before leaving the home for the convenience store. At the AM/PM, he filled up the red gas container, then returned to the Milkin residence, where he splashed the accelerant around the home before setting it ablaze. He felt he was in the clear, so he returned home where he went to bed. Connor claimed he only committed the act of arson because he didn't believe he killed the family. He believed if he didn't destroy the evidence, police wouldn't believe his story. And police didn't. The blackout theory became a big topic of discussion since they felt he had enough wits about him to try and cover up his tracks. Plus, the wounds on his arms and face indicated a struggle occurred. But one problem was motive. No one could understand why Connor would hurt the Milkins. According to Connor's friends and colleagues, he was passionate, well-mannered, and intelligent. Connor was a self-described alcoholic and drug addict who was a patient at the Lakeside Milam Recovery Center. After completing his program, he moved to a halfway house before he transitioned to living with a roommate in the Kirkland duplex. Members of the program stated Connor was just a normal guy. He worked at the Carillion Point Business and Hotel Complex for about a year and a half, where he did general maintenance and never caused problems. He had no prior criminal record. While being questioned, Connor's residence was searched, where investigators uncovered a pair of running shoes with traces of blood and gas. The shoe treads also matched the footprints found at and near the Milkins' home. Combined with his confession and evidence to place him at the scene, Connor was officially charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. He was held at the King County Jail until his arraignment on July 31, 2006. While awaiting to hear the next steps of the trial, Leonid planned a memorial service alongside his extended family for their lost loved ones. On July 23, 2006, at the City Church in Kirkland, all 4 members were honored by nearly the whole community. The church was packed shoulder to shoulder, with mourners unsure of why this happened. Leonid found ways to cope with his loss by leaning on friends and family to push him through. He stated that he saw real violence in Iraq and couldn't imagine something of this magnitude would happen to his own family. He expected this level of brutality from a war-riddled country, but not in America. Connor appeared in court on July 31st, where he entered his plea of not guilty, and a bond of $10 million was set. The state issued that they intended to pursue the death penalty. His attorney filed a motion to dismiss the murder charges shortly after his arraignment, when the Kirkland Police Department accidentally released 300 pages of the case file and evidence to a local TV station. In this motion, his attorney claimed the release was a planned attack by the media and police to try the case in the press before he even entered a plea, but the motion was dismissed. It would take more than 3 years before his trial began due to it being a high-profile case. The jury selection process started in November of 2009. Questioning concluded several weeks later, and the trial date was set for January 20th, 2010. It lasted 11 weeks, where prosecution introduced DNA evidence. His DNA was found in several places inside the home, including on a pair of men's shorts and on the glove and knife found. Olga's DNA was found on his necklace he was wearing at the time of his arrest, and also on the soles of his shoes recovered. On March 16, 2010, prosecution rested its case. The defense relied heavily on expert testimony from an addiction specialist, Dr. Sweeney, who testified that blackouts from excessive drinking were very common. Typically, a blackout lasts no more than 6 hours, and during these periods, the blackout drinkers are able to walk and talk, but unable to process current actions. It was determined Connor had 4 times the legal limit in his system. The defense rested on April 5, 2010, without Connor testifying in his defense. Closing arguments were heard 3 days later, where prosecution stated the murders were premeditated and aggravated, which warranted the death penalty. They believed voluntary intoxication inducing blackout was not a legal defense. While the defense didn't dispute Connor's involvement, but rather claimed the evidence suggested someone else killed the victims, or that Connor was too intoxicated to create the intent needed for a first-degree aggravated murder conviction. The case concluded, where the jury deliberated for 9 hours before delivering the verdict on April 12, 2010. The jury found Connor guilty of 4 counts of aggravated first-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree arson. The penalty phase started on April 19, 2010. The prosecution presented testimony from 4 members of the victims' families, where each member described their lives and the impact their deaths had on them, whereas the defense tried to personalize Connor, bringing in several character witnesses from his family, friends, and teachers who described his upbringing. Connor had a troubled past, including childhood abuse, which ultimately led to his addictions. During this phase, Connor took the stand, where he delivered a statement apologizing to the victims' families, but never took responsibility for the murders. He tearfully spoke, stating, "I may not have the right to ask anything of you, but I'm asking for mercy. If not for me, then for those who love me." After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury served a special findings verdict on May 8, 2010, where they suggested Connor be executed for his crimes. On May 27, 2010, Connor was officially sentenced to be executed by the court. Connor once again spoke, refusing to apologize to the families while maintaining his innocence. He claimed the death penalty would not be justice, but vengeance. Both Leonid and Olga's family were very happy with the outcome, believing justice was served. After his sentencing, Connor was transferred to the Washington State Penitentiary, where he waited on death row. Immediately after the decision was read, Connor's attorney notified the court of his intention to appeal the verdict to the Washington Supreme Court due to an issue with jury selection and inflammatory statements made by prosecution in court. In 2014, Governor Jay Inslee announced that while in office, he was suspending the use of the death penalty in Washington. The action didn't preclude legal proceedings seeking the penalty prior to him taking office. Connor's case was reheard from the motion filed by his attorney on April 12, 2018, where the Washington Supreme Court upheld both Connor's conviction and sentence. But then, 6 months later, the Supreme Court members ruled unanimously in a different case that the Washington death penalty was invalid. As a result, Connor and 7 other men on death row had their sentences converted from death to life in prison without parole. His defense team stated Connor was a good person and he was convicted of a horrible crime. They don't believe that anyone will ever know what happened on July 17th, but they claimed it's not Connor. It never was. After the trial was finished, Leonid was able to rebuild the family home with the help of his community. Many members volunteered their time and crowdsourced funds by setting up an account at a local bank and holding garage sales. Leonid was honored the community came together. He was surprised at first, but then it became clear to him that this is how a community responds to moments of tragedy. Those involved in the project felt no one deserved this more than him. Leonid thinks of his new home as a memorial to his family, and feels it does not resemble the place the murders occurred. Hi friends, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, so please leave them below and we can chat about this case. If you found this to be informative, please consider giving the video a thumbs up to let YouTube know you want more from me. And lastly, if you're not subscribed yet, you should, because we would love to have you under the ash tree. I wanted to add some things that are currently in the works. If you remember a few months ago, I suggested a channel for you all to check out, and I know some of you may already be familiar with Horror Behind the Photo, but I was recently asked to join in on a project he has coming up, and I'm excited for this collaboration. It's always great to get to work with other members of the community, so I hope you all will be on the lookout for that when we finish it up. But in the meantime, if you haven't seen his channel already, check it out and get acquainted. He's talented in what he does and definitely deserves the attention. I'll link his channel below in the description. Secondly, I mentioned in my last upload, but I'm on Patreon, so if you're interested in supporting the channel further, it is linked on the channel. Signing up not only directly supports me and the videos when censorship occurs, but also allows you to have early access to ad-free content and additional benefits. So if this sounds something that you would be interested in, please check it out. Thank you again to Becky Blanchard 835 for suggesting this case, and thank you to all of you for continuing to share your time and support with me each week. I appreciate all of your love and support always, but for now, we have to part ways. So stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, friends.